Okay, so thank you. Welcome to our December 20th, holy cow, council meeting, work session. We're going to start with board and commission interviews, and we have a couple tonight. We're going to start with an interview for the Business Development Commission and Julia Leaning. Please, if you'll come right up here. If you will just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to serve on the BDC. And then we'll give the council an opportunity to ask you questions. It'll be nothing hard, I'm sure.
Okay, sounds good. I am Julia Leanig. I am the owner of Descendant. It is a women's clothing boutique over in the Crossroads district off of Big Bend. I am coming up on my third year in business in Webster. I actually opened and then 2 weeks later had to shut down with all the closings for COVID. So I am thrilled to still be in business. Webster has been a great place for me to have a business. I feel like the community is really good about showing up, especially in kind of like a off spot like the Crossroads district. But I am interested in joining the Business Development Commission because I believe in the city of Webster as a great place to have a business. And I also just see so much opportunity, not only in my district, but all over the city, and would just love to be a part of it.
Thank you, and credit to you. I didn't realize, I knew you'd opened around the beginning of the pandemic, but holy cow. Does anyone have questions? No, see, I told you this would be a pretty easy thing. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay, and it won't hurt our feelings if you leave. As well. You might have some other things to do tonight. Who knows? Thank you very much. We also have interviewing with us tonight for the Plan Commission, Mike Clay. So Mike, you've seen it in action.
Seen it.
Same drill, just a different commission.
All right, I'll just tell the whole story. I am Arkansan. I met my wife in Northwest Arkansas. She was working at the Walmart home office. She's from St. Charles. We moved to St. Louis in 2013, U-City in 2014, and then we got pregnant. Neither of us is Catholic. We both went to public school. We wanted to go somewhere, move somewhere with good public schools. So we were looking at all the woods, you know, Maple, Brent, Kirk. We landed in a grove. I work in Hazelwood in North County, and I've, lived in Webster now for 7-8 years and have seen the surrounding municipalities, Kirkwood, Brentwood, what they do with their towns. They cover them with asphalt and high rises, and there's a cost for that. And I like, when I get home, my neighborhood's 2 degrees cooler than the surrounding area, trees. And I'd like to be a part of the Planning Commission, to be a part of what keeps Webster great.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody have questions?
What do you do for a living?
I'm a quality engineer in aerospace.
Oh, wonderful. What company, if you can share, what company?
I work for Stroke Manufacturing. They're small, mom and pop. We make ships.
What interests you in the Plan Commission specifically?
The Plan Commission specifically is, I'd like to be able to keep what makes Webster, but also support growth, but without giving up
That's the struggle,
the
right?
aesthetic
Yeah,
of it.
Absolutely.
I don't quite have the words for that, but yeah,
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
for applying for being-
Can I ask a question?
sure.
Yeah, please.
I noticed that you had a couple of other commissions listed on your application as well, just knowing that we're going through kind of a period of turnover on some of our other commissions. If you were invited to interview for a different commission, would that be acceptable as well?
Yes, that would also be acceptable, for sure.
Thanks.
I have a question. So I know that one of the things that we've talked about often is some of the need to have some diversity in housing types in Webster. How does that mesh with your desire to keep things where they are?
I don't see a problem with that per se, as long as it's done well. There's a way to do mixed use and keep it green spaces.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, thank you very much, Mike. And the same thing, you're welcome to stay, but it won't hurt anyone's feelings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will point out that you also received today from Katie, a letter from Kyle Wilson, who wants to be considered for the Plan Commission as well. He was unable to be here today, but has interviewed with us in the past for that position. Is that right?
Correct. And he does serve as an alternate on ARB right now. Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. We will turn now to a review of the regular agenda. I know the city manager has something she'd like to mention, but any council members with anything at the moment? All right, please.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So this evening for council consideration during the regular meeting are 3 contracts, and they are with the police sergeants and lieutenants in terms of the collective bargaining agreements. Additionally, with that, you will have a letter of understanding to accompany those. It's really exciting. I'm looking forward to questions during the regular meeting time from each of you. I believe both the officers and the city have negotiated a great contract, so I'm really looking forward to hopefully council's approval for that. Are there any questions I could answer ahead of the regular meeting?
Okay, so those are currently in the consent agenda. We'll pause to review the consent agenda. So if there are any questions or comments at that time, we'll figure out whether we need to remove it or not, and remove those items or not. But thank you. I appreciate you alerting us, since that was a little late in our agenda process.
Thank you.
All right, meeting updates and issues. Councilmember Richardson, would you like to kick us off?
I don't have any updates this time, sorry.
No updates, Mayor.
I have updates.
Phew.
Last night, the sustainability met just for one purpose. They had one agenda item, and that was to hear a presentation by Dr. Sharon Locke. She's a professor of environmental sciences at SIUE. And she presented a report about greenhouse gas inventories that they've done both, that her master's students have done both for Granite City and Collinsville. The students partner with the cities to evaluate greenhouse gas emissions generated by two different areas. One is municipal operations, and second is by the community. And these studies identify areas for reduction, which ultimately present cost savings for the municipalities and the communities. This type of survey is something that the Sustainability Commission has been talking about for the last few months and especially as the next step for Forever Webster Groves. So they asked a lot of questions about timing and estimates for the services, and they generally offer it at a reduced rate especially compared to the professional consultants. So I think they're going to be giving that a lot of consideration in the next month or two. BDC is taking a break this month. And then finally, last week, I attended Washington University's Brown School presentation called Welcome Home, How Thoughtful Housing Policy Promotes Thriving Communities. Others of us attended, and I'm sure you can expand upon just the fact that it was a very impressive presentation. And I feel that we each walked away inspired and more knowledgeable about housing policies.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Franklin.
Nothing for me, Madam Mayor.
Nothing.
Green Space didn't meet this month, but for the Historic Preservation Commission, commission, the Lestron homes, we had the public information session, the previous meeting, and I think in January, we have our public hearing at the commission level. And so that would probably make its way to council after that. That's
Okay. Great, thank you.
That's all.
Anything from you?
No, thank you.
Mr. Bruntrager?
I have no updates, man.
Boy, this is just going right along.
I could tell you where I was on my Christmas shopping, but I don't think you want to.
Yeah. Dr. Peoples?
Yes, ma'am. And should you hear any jingling over here, it is not me. So,
For the clarification.
yes. I am excited to share that the finance team has again got the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award. So a huge
Hey,
congratulations
well
to the
done.
finance team. Finance Director, Mr. Eric Peterson as well, but lots of work, as council knows, goes into this, and we'll share more with the community as we get the award and dig into it, but really proud of the work that's been done. Let's see, the aquatic survey. It is now closed, but we ended it with 1,054.
Wow, that's great.
It really is. And if you're wondering, the strategic planning did not receive 1,054. But the aquatic survey is really good. And then just a reminder that City Hall will be closed this Friday and Monday in observation of the holidays.
All right, I have a couple things. I had the pleasure last week of having lunch with the Women of the Monday Club who wrapped presents to be distributed by the senior round table in our community, which was a lot of fun. And I ended up taking 6 bags of presents that were subsequently distributed. So thanks to the Senior Roundtable and the Monday Club. The Charter Review Advisory Board Committee met, as well as the Subcommittee on Compensation met. They're moving along. Again, they're working their way through the document and will begin, I think, probably sometime in late February to start really making some decisions about language and recommendations. And then I will just also reiterate what Pam had to say. I welcome home how thoughtful policy creates thriving communities. Was a good event. I had the privilege of working with Dr. Molly Metzger's class this past semester on some of those proposals and ideas. And those students they make me feel like the world is going to be a better place, which is a nice feeling to have. We had more than 30 local policymakers, both staff members and elected officials from mostly the mid-county area, but some from other areas as well. So I'm looking forward to next year, not only having us do some work together, but also reaching out to some of our neighbors to see if there are things that we certainly can collaborate on. All right, so that brings us to our topics, and we are going to start with updates from the Architectural Review Board. Bob Buckman, I believe you are ready to share with us. Thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
Maybe not the best timing for you all, but we appreciate your presence.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I guess just to start off, to give you a little update on the ARB in the last few years. Helping preserve the scale and character of the community is really, I think, what our board members do. And they take it pretty seriously, professionally and friendly, all at the same time, I think. The majority of the projects that come to us, we have minor comments and nothing. Some of them we don't have any comments. Some will have some minor comments. Sometimes we recommend revisions that the homeowners appreciate and incorporate. With historic districts, we typically have discussion about the guidelines, which are there to help protect and preserve our architectural past. With additions to homes, we usually take a look and make sure that they stay in scale and character and they're compatible with the original house. With new builds, we also review those for the character and scale within the surrounding context in which they are built. Usually without mandating an architectural style. So what I'll say is that our board members understand that these projects that we review are seen from all sides, the backyard, the side yard, and the front yard. So the character and scale is important from all of those aspects. And of course, there's always the occasional window review where we try to make sure the windows all match one another. We've had a few of those come through. So I think for the most part, just a little overview of, I think, how our board sees itself and what we do twice a month. I think Mara did prepare some slides, which I'll get to in a minute. It's been, I think, 4 years since I was here last. We've had some obvious changes in that time period, some hurdles that had to overcome. Positive, I think, for our board, there were changes that were made, basically going from in-person meetings to we would individually review projects, board members on their own. Whether that was just reviewing the plans, going to Google Earth and checking out the site and the context, or driving to the site, which a lot of our board members do. But that going to that Zoom format and that process, which Mara and her staff really put forth, I think really greatly reduced the amount of time that we spend as a board in the meeting. It streamlined the process, because really the benefit for the applicants was they could get comments from the board members ahead of time and contemplate, review them. Sometimes, like I said at the beginning, oftentimes our comments are minor. There might be small revisions on the drawings or something that they didn't catch. And what we usually see because of that is a large number of pre-approvals where Mara and her staff are able to inform the applicants that, that the board has pre-approved their project. Sometimes it's an agreement to some minor adjustment. Maybe there's a window missing here, something missing there. In short, that's been much more efficient, I think, for both our public applicants, fellow citizens here, and the board members themselves. Although we still work pretty hard. I think since 2018, Mara did put together the slide, and I was thinking, I wasn't sure, but I'm like, yeah, somewhere in the range of 200 projects a year. I think it's gone down some over the years because, as I'm sure council is aware, some projects that we used to review, we don't any longer. Those are approved by staff. So we don't see everything as we used to when I first started on the board 8 years ago. So yeah, I was going to say the only negative about the change was we used to meet on a table and the applicants would come and sit with us. And I always thought that that was a little more interactive and a little bit less formal. But it's fine. I understand with the Zoom, we all have to be mic'd. So I think it works just fine. It's kind of interesting to be on the applicant side now. So most folks don't have a problem with it. I think some people do get a little nervous sometimes when they stand up here. So sitting at that table seemed to be a way to, be a little less formal. Since we last met, our board members have remained pretty much constant the whole time, with the exception of one, I think, who termed out. She's on a different commission now. We've seen some staff changes, but the transitions have been very smooth thanks to Mara and her staff. I like to think that our volunteer architects that are on this board and our landscape architect all take the board very seriously. And they do review each project individually within its own context. They don't really bring preconceived ideas in that sense. I've been to some ARBs in the past and presented where I've seen, that. And I don't think the Webster ARB does that. Let's see, reviewing each project on its own merits, I think, is important. Our members ask relevant questions, are very professional, they're friendly, and they're usually positive, which I think is really at the heart of what the Architectural Review Board is, what every community member and applicant that comes to the ARB review process deserves. And with that, I'll ask, is there any questions?
Thank you. Do we have questions?
I just have one. The total ARB reviews, do that include the pre-approvals or just the ones that come to your desk?
Yeah. All of the reviews that are on the chart, 218, 205, 199, 213, and 191. Each of those were the number of projects our board reviewed. And within that group, Mara broke down the number that are historic and the number that are new homes. And I couldn't tell you statistically how many we pre-approved, but I can just give you a gut feel since beginning. It's more than half. Usually, sometimes it's the whole lot. It's just become a lot more efficient in that way. Because we used to have to sit and talk through all that for the first time with the applicant, so it took a lot longer. So I think it's been a lot more effective.
I just remember when the ARB was meeting, they start transitioning to more pre-approvals.
Yeah.
Morris team looked like there was more efficiency and less projects to look at. That's why I want to know if there was 191s, but you
Yeah.
actually reviewed, or was that including what Morris team reviewed?
Oh, I think there's more than that. I think I'm going to guess that there's more projects that the city reviewed beyond that 191 to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Make a comment.
Please.
I just wanted to commend you. I've been the liaison now just for a few months, but I've learned a lot just from watching, and you're a remarkably prepared group of people who take your role very seriously and also do a great job of walking that line between, kindness and sternness when needed. And it's been really great to watch. So I just wanted to say, great job.
appreciate that. And it's
And I do want to tag on too, because I watched that transition right in the middle of my liaison. Oh, my goodness. I mean, it was just moving right along with the process when you had the pre-approvals. And it
Sure.
appeared that you guys had structured your mindset not to be so picky, I guess, with their projects.
So it's 100% on Zoom now?
it's Zoom optional.
It's hybrid
So
Okay.
fortunately, I think we're in here most of the time. Only occasionally since we've come back have we went to Zoom. That's only when we have nothing but pre-approvals or some other certs. I think it's only been a couple times since we've come back.
So applicants are in person as well, or do they have the option to?
They have the
Zoom?
option to do either, or
Okay.
as do board members as well, which I think is great to have that flexibility.
Mhm,
I think it's working out great.
mhm.
Obviously, the technology is a curve at times, or it can present a challenge, but I think, we've gotten through them all.
Well, I mean, you are unique in that you are giving individual advice to residents, and you do, it's impressive, the dedication you have to prepare, learn each project, and you do that twice a month, every month. So, yeah, nice job.
Thank you.
Bob, thanks so much for being here, and I appreciate and commend your service to the ARB and to the city and community. I know that you've been on the ARB for quite some time, so thank you very much.
Absolutely.
One of the things that this council has discussed over the past several years now is truly the character of the community. And I think, as you put it, the ARB, you look at it as preserving the character of the community. However, one thing that we as council have not done is looked at how can the ARB help us not only preserve the character of the community, but change the character of the community, such as with duplexes or affordable housing of some concept. The last time you were here, I remember I asked you how the ARB takes into account, when they're making a recommendation, the cost it has to the homeowner, because every dollar that you spend on the outside is one less dollar you can spend on the inside, especially when you talk about affordable housing. So I guess this is more of a theoretical question and a question to help guide council. How can we help give you guys guidance to help us ensure that whenever you do make a recommendation, that it takes into account the costs that's associated with that?
Yeah.
And so we don't have skyrocketing home prices because of, for instance, windows or
Sure.
because of stucco.
Mhm.
Is there any way that you perceive our job to give you guidance to make sure that we are fulfilling what we as council want to do, which is create more affordable housing, create different types of housing?
Yeah. I think really, to me, when it comes to affordable housing, proportions are free. So what architects are trained to work with clients within their budget. It doesn't mean it has to look bad. So I would say, I definitely support affordable housing, affordable materials, keeping some sort of aspect of character on a house is important, however, equally, but also the value of the home itself. So I think it's important to understand it's not all about the money. And, you know, on the ARB, when we have had times when folks talk about the cost of this or the cost of that, and usually we're sensitive to that. So we just ask them, well, maybe consider this instead, maybe 2 smaller windows, you know, because everyone always wants to say windows are expensive. That's always the one that everyone says, but
It's the easy one, right?
it's the
Yeah.
easy one. So but I think, you know, that doesn't allow that fact alone. I don't think we want, you know, walls of windowless homes in our community. I think this is something I just think my fellow board members typically would agree on, that I think that's what we try to do. And we try to be cognitive of budget, of course. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I
Or,
appreciate it.
or answers the
Yeah,
question,
no, I
David.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You
Bob.
bet.
Other questions, comments? Bob, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, and please give our thanks to the rest of your board members as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. All right. Good night all. And
Good
nice to meet you in person, Sarah. It's been Zoom the whole time.
I don't blame you.
night. All right, next we have Jeff Smith, who's here to discuss the Plan Commission. This is all Mara's commissions all the time tonight.
Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to speak, Mayor Arnold and council members. First of all, I was hoping Mike would stay so I could kind of talk to him about the, you know, the adulation we get as part of the Plan Commission. Positive support and letters to the editor, but he'll have to wait for that. So, I mean, pretty much everything we do does come to council. So I don't think you probably see a lot of surprises here, and looking at the ARB numbers, I feel a little inadequate in the number of things that we do. But could we put up that graph? So Amara was gracious enough to kind of pull some numbers together about what we've done over the last 4 or 5 years. You know, and what. Well, let me back up. Let me talk a little bit about the council itself. I think we're a pretty diverse group. I think we do have a lot of differing opinions and ways to come at decisions. I do think that it seems it's not a groupthink kind of consensus, but we do typically agree. You know, most things pass unanimously, and sometimes I wonder if there's you know, if something's getting lost in that. Apart from perhaps zoning, which can be contentious, we know with Douglas Hill. But we have a good group of folks. Real proud to work with them. We've had some turnover over the years, but you know, I think everybody brings a good perspective. So I think we really get a good balance of people and where they're coming from and backgrounds and things like that. So, you know, a lot of what we do, most of what we do, final development plans. We just, you know, review what's been presented for conformance with what had been proposed. Conditional use permits, which just allowing for checking on allowed uses in specific zoning districts, right? That's probably the most of what we do, and that's, you know, that's probably reflected up there. Zoning is obviously less of a numbers there, but still probably something pretty important, and those probably do become the most, you know, contentious, and not even always contentious, but the most opportunity for you know, differing opinions on things. Text amendments is also a pretty significant thing. You see that's gone down over the last several years. Everything else has really remained, you know, statistically consistent even through COVID, I think. And I'll talk a little bit more about text amendments here, and then subdivision plats, typically pretty straightforward process. So text amendments, I kind of looked at, or Mara pulled up, you know, what we've done over the last few years. We group homes, telecommunications facilities, parking standards, residentials, 2-family and single family dimensional requirements, multiple family uses. And I kind of looked at, they kind of fall into three categories, I think, with what we've done over the last several years. One is just kind of cleaning up language to make it clearer. Another is, updating code for current uses and things like that, as people's how we do business, how we live changes, and making that more current. And then, how people use the property, how, and there has been this, a focus, and I think it's, probably been driven in part by council, for more affordable housing. How can we get, multiple family housing? And so I think that's kind of what we do, as far as text amendments. I understand there's some future amendments that council's asking us, or will be asking us to look at accessory dwellings, multiple dwellings on one lot. Again, with an eye more towards affordable housing in the community, lot coverage, and how that can interact with stormwater and things like that. And, are we overbuilding, underbuilding? And we've done there's been a lot of that in the last several years, but again, kind of refining that a little more. And one other thing was electrical vehicle charging, and that kind of falls into that, how usage of changing society and what's important, and how can we adapt to, to make it a welcoming place for new technologies. So I guess we'll be looking for, direction on that and studying that coming up. Looking back, one thing we did see was medical marijuana was 2019, and now we have recreational too. So will that be something that we want to consider, how that can be an allowed use? So that's it. I guess to kind of reflect the question earlier, I guess to the ARB, are there ways the commission can better share our debate with you all? We have, representation and Member Alexander. I don't know if we've met in person, or if we were but virtual one or the other time. So welcome to us. But yeah, if there's a better way to communicate, sometimes I feel like we're a little bit operating in concert, but in two separate spaces. So I would welcome any thoughts there, and we as a council could certainly, or as commission could certainly do some thinking on that as well. So
Right.
that's my ramblings.
Do we have more questions, comments?
Thank you very much for being here. You guys don't have an easy job. I mean, you guys probably get the most criticism out of all our boards, commission. So thank you for taking that on and for helping us build a better community.
I'm kind of interested in the public hearings. Do you have that? Is that on your column? Just curious, the number. Okay.
Oh, and text amendment.
Yeah.
It's been pretty steady these last 2 years.
So I'm curious. So David asked the last sort of philosophical question. I'll ask you this one, Jeff. The last couple of years, we being council have partnered with you all to do some things in the community that frankly, the community in the end didn't like all that much. Are there lessons you feel like we should have learned from this last couple of years as a commission?
I guess it's probably a bit of a heavy lift, but I think setting expectations in the community ahead of time, I think a lot of people, I mean, Douglas Hill is an example, people, well, we should do this, or, and these are all great ideas, but a developer's involved as well. And it's gotta be financially feasible for, and we can argue, pros and cons of that. But I think sometimes the expectations in the public aren't quite aligned with reality there. So maybe as part of the public comment session or some way to, make that a little, educate the public a little better. That's one thing that comes to mind. But.
I absolutely agree with that. Anybody else have questions or comments? No. Jeff, thank you very much for being with us. And also please do give our thanks to your commission as well.
Will do. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Right. We are going to move on to our presentation about loggers. We're going to learn a lot. I know we are. And Mr. Peterson is here to introduce our guest.
Thank you all, Mayor and council members. We are going to be joined and coming in on Zoom. Jeff Pabst is the outreach coordinator for loggers, the local area government employee retirement system for Missouri that we are members of. So he's going to go walk through some Webster Groves information, very enlightening, what Jeff brought to us as administration, just, part of our history, plan model that we operate under. We do have some documents that are available on the table, and we'll put those on the web as well. And then when Jeff is done, we'll come back and walk through just some, actually the documents we're talking about are on the screen. Jeff has them up, but we'll have a couple from administration, a couple things to walk through, very localized regarding the pension. So I'll be back. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I hope not to spend too much of your time, but also hope that you learn a whole lot tonight. Of course, if you have questions, feel free to just vocalize them and interrupt me at any point. So kind of my plan is to kind of give you a little bit of a walkthrough of the process the city went through originally, kind of the path they've taken since then, and then talk to you about the choices you have as a council, and then also just a financial update of your contribution rates and a few other things. So let's just go ahead and get straight into it. For those who don't know who Loggers is a statewide public pension plan created by the Missouri General Assembly in 1967. They were created for the purposes of recruiting and retaining local government workers in the state of Missouri. And the type of plans that we provide are defined benefit plans. So what we're going to be doing as far as the members are concerned is providing our members with guaranteed income that they earn as they serve their community. So the longer they serve their community, the larger their benefit becomes. They don't earn it overnight. It takes a long time to generate a large benefit from us. So when the city joined back in 2013, prior to that, there's a little bit of history with the city having their own defined benefit plan. I'm not sure the exact dates on that, but they liquidated that defined benefit plan and turned it into a defined contribution plan. And about a decade later, they entertained the idea of joining Loggers. So that happened. The city joined on July 1st, 2013. When they joined at a slightly lower level of benefits that you're at now. We'll kind of get into that in a second. But what you see on the screen, the top two lines are the elections that the city made that are one-time elections. So there's a one-time election for membership, meaning when you opt in for Loggers coverage, it's a permanent partnership. But there's two other one-time elections that they make. One is who's covered. That's the annual hours required for coverage there on the top of the screen. That is the indication when the council elects that. It's the number of hours an individual must work at the city of Webster Groves in order to be eligible for Loggers coverage. Anyone below those hours is not eligible, okay? But it's a mandatory eligibility. So once they're working above the hours, they're mandated to be in the system, okay? And thereby subject to any of the benefit elections that the city has made, which includes employee contributions, which we'll get to in a minute. The other one-time election that was made is the amount of prior service coverage. And the city elected at the time in 2013 to elect 0%. And this had very much a heavy amount of to do with the previous plans that were in place at the city, formerly the defined benefit plan and the defined contribution plan. Both of those plans were considered to be similar in purpose. And there's laws within Loggers statutes that prohibits similar in purpose service credit. So that's the reason why the 0% election was made. So those are the permanent elections. The components we're going to talk about next have a direct impact on the amount employees can receive from our system, but also can be changed, okay? So the benefit program, all of Loggers benefits calculate using a 3-component formula that we multiply together to give an employee their payment. We take a multiplier. The multiplier is the first component, and that's a percentage selected by you, the council, and it ranges between 1% and 2.5%, which you can see here on the screen. Okay, if someone has a 2% multiplier, we take 2% times someone's salary times their years of credited service, and that gives you their monthly benefit that's payable for life. Okay, currently at the city, your general employees have a 1.75% program, and your police and fire have the 2.5% program. And the reason they're able to be segmented like that is statute does allow for groups at individual employers to have separate benefit elections when their Social Security coverage is different. And your police and fire folks don't participate in Social Security, which gives them the eligibility to have a different level of benefits. And it also gives them the eligibility to have the 2.5% program. Okay. So again, we're going to take one of those multipliers times an average salary. Average salary is also a component that you, the board, will elect or elected when you join and can change. So what we're going to do is we're going to look back 120 months for an employee's retirement date. And then we will take the highest consecutive 60-month average from the last 120, and we will plug that into the formula. Okay, so we'll take the 1.75% or the 2.5 times that average salary, and we're times someone's credited service, and that's going to give them their monthly benefit that is payable for the remainder of their life. Those two components, average salary and multiplier, have a direct impact on the amount an individual employee can draw from our plan upon retirement. Okay. The next two components do not have a direct impact on the dollar amount. They do have an impact. Well, the first one has an impact on your cost and how you fund the funding mechanism. And the other one has an impact on when an individual can draw benefit from the plan. Okay. First is employee contributions. So you have the choice for employees to contribute either nothing, call that 0% contributions, or non-contributory, it's an interchangeable, or you can require employees to contribute 2%, 4%, or 6%. You make the choice of whether it's 2, 4, or 6%. Currently, the city requires all employees who are working in covered positions to contribute 4% of their gross pay as a condition of employment. Okay, so anybody who's working above the covered hours must contribute 4%. Now, what that 4% does is it doesn't necessarily add to their benefit. What it does is it allows for potentially the employer to afford a larger benefit program. But generally what it's doing is it's assisting the city in funding the benefits for the employees. So if the cost of benefits, for example, is say 18% of payroll, okay, and you're requiring 4% employee contributions, employees would pay 4 and the employer would pay the remaining 14. Now, that's a generality. It's not exactly 4, but generally that's how it works. Okay. And then finally, the other election that you, the council, can make is retirement eligibility. Okay. So you can choose when an individual is eligible to draw payment from the loggers plan. Okay. And you have elected what's called regular or normal retirement. That's age 60 for general employees and 55 for police officers. That's the age in which those groups of employees can terminate employment from the city and draw benefits with no reduction. They can draw it a little earlier with reduction, but they will take that reduction since they are making the choice to retire earlier. It's also not a mandatory retirement date. So they can continue working beyond those ages and continue growing a benefit for loggers. So there's no mandated retirement date with us, but the earliest a general employee could go would be the age of 60. And the earliest a police and fire employee could go would be the age of 55, assuming they are vested. So vesting in our system, if you don't know what vesting means, it means guaranteed to receive payment. But vesting in the loggers system is 5 years of service. Upon completion of their 6th month or 5 years, they're vested and then guaranteed to receive benefit from us in the future. So then the other, the supplemental piece of the information that Mr. Peterson will provide you is the second page here. These are just samples of how a benefit calculates based on years of service and salary. Okay. Any questions about the things I've discussed thus far?
Yeah, thanks so much for being here, Jeff. I have a few questions. The first would be, how does this compare with, well, let me ask a more general question. If a municipality or local government in the state of Missouri does not join loggers, what do they use? Actually,
right. So most municipalities, I mean, what we've seen is we're still actually a growing organization. We still have been onboarding subdivisions since 2013 and well before that as well, and well after. But what we've seen the most of is two primary things. They either are providing a defined contribution plan of some sort, so like a 401k type plan, or a 457 type plan, or they are providing nothing, which, you know, you're probably like, wow, is that really happening? Yeah, quite a bit. I'd say about of the employers that have onboarded, around 65% of them are or changing from a defined contribution plan into a defined benefit plan with loggers. And then the others just don't have anything at all.
Gotcha. So how does our loggers compare to the state of Missouri's plan for state employees?
So for state employees, they have their own individual plan. It also kind of depends on what department of the state as well. It's a little convoluted there, but if it's just like Mosier's, for example, which is just the larger state plan, your plan's really close. They have a 1.6% multiplier. And the majority of those folks that are in that Mosier's plan are not public safety employees. They're just they're civilian employees. And so they have a 1.6% multiplier, and your general employees have a 1.75%. So it's better than the state, but very close.
Gotcha. So can you explain to me a little bit about this regular retirement age? Specifically, I mean, Social Security's retirement age obviously continues to rise in order to get the full benefit, but is it normal for a municipality to have a retirement age of 60 to get without reduction in benefits?
Nationally, yes. It's actually very common to have a little bit of a younger age of 55 for the public safety roles. It's also fairly common to have a 60, 62 age range for retirement ages across the country for municipal employees. It's not terribly uncommon. Now, typically when plans are making changes to retirement ages, and you kind of spoke to that with Social Security, most of the time there's kind of a reason why they're doing that. And it doesn't have much to do with not really wanting to let people retire. It has more to do with the funding mechanism. And if they're trying to make those funds last for an more significant amount of time, and trying to spread the trust out for a little bit longer period of time by making folks wait to draw that plan benefit, that's a way to create solvency very, very easily. And our plan doesn't have a need like that, because we're a pre-funded system, meaning we're collecting contributions in advance of someone's retirement, so that by the time they retire, the funds necessary to pay for their benefit are already in the trust. And being in that sort of format, and also having a strong funding policy, where we're still one of the best funded pension plans in the country, puts us in a place where retirement age isn't really a discussion for us, because we don't have a funding need. A lot of times when you see a push of a retirement age, it has more to do with how long can these funds actually last. And if you're paying them from 60 to a projected age of 85 versus 65 to a projected age of 85, that's less money they got to pay out.
Yeah.
So it's adding
That makes
solvency to the
sense.
plan. Yeah.
Do you know what the historical purpose is? Why municipal employees retirement age was lower than, say, Social Security? You might not, if you don't know it, it's perfectly fine.
I don't know specifically.
Yeah.
I think most of the time, I think you could lean a little bit on the reason it's a little bit younger than Social Security, and keeping in mind Social Security used to be the age of 62.
Yeah.
Way back when. But I would say historically it has to do with retirement benefits. Defined benefit plans specifically were created in a way to recruit and retain, and having an earlier retirement age is an incentive.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of history there. I don't know the specifics, but I would say that's definitely one of the reasons why you would see that. Because even in defined benefit plans, when they were in the private sector prior to just public sector defined benefit plans, they still had earlier retirement ages than Social Security in some cases.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Not a problem. Any other questions before I move on to just a quick funding update?
I think you can go ahead, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. So what you're seeing on the screen now is I'm going to show you a snippet, a few pages from your annual actuarial valuation. A whole bunch of jargon terms that mean your cost and the schedule of your cost and the progress of your cost. So on this first
No,
page,
it's not.
what we're seeing is
Yeah.
and I'll zoom in.
Yeah, Jeff, is it possible to zoom a little bit? We're having.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Perfect. Thank you
I'm
very
sorry.
much.
I just realized that you were seeing the whole page and I was like, you probably can't read that.
Thank you.
No problem. So what you're seeing here is a snippet of that. So as how Loggers assesses contributions is as a percentage of total gross payroll. That's how we collect contributions on a month-to-month basis. Okay. So the total employer contribution rate is what you will be paying. And this is effective July 1st of 23. So I'm showing you your valuation from that we issued actually in July of 20. It goes into effect for your fiscal year in July of 23. Okay, so we issue them in July, and in your case, you're getting it a year in advance. Okay. The contribution rates themselves, what we're going to talk about here is how it's down. So there are three components to a contribution rate that are added together that equal up to that total employer contribution rate. And we're going to talk about what each one actually does, the purpose of each one. So normal cost, the normal cost rate is the pre-funding component of the plan. Okay. It is paying for the current year of service credit for the current group of employees. Okay. So remember earlier when we were kind of recollecting back to retirement ages and things like that, I said, we're a pre-funded plan. This is the mechanism that's doing that. It's setting funds aside for your current group of employees so that by the time someone retires, in theory, by the time someone retires, the funds necessary to pay for that benefit are in place. Okay. The casualty rate is a pooled cost. All of our 843 subdivisions pay into the same pool, and it's for the purposes of duty-related disability or death benefits. Okay. So when we think about duty-related disability or death benefits, for loggers benefits, what happens is if someone leaves employment due to a duty-related disability or death, we extend service credit to their benefit as if they'd worked until the age of 60. Okay, so if you have, say, a 30-year-old who goes out on duty-related disability, we extend service credit to that benefit as if they'd worked till 60. So there's 30 years of service credit that hadn't been funded with a normal cost rate. And the funds necessary for that extension of service credit come from what's called the Casualty Reserve Fund. That's the pooled fund that the casualty rate is paying into. And as you can see, they're a little bit different based on department. So more or less based on usage of the fund. Okay, so general employees generally aren't going to be utilizing duty-related disability benefits potentially as much as, say, a police officer or firefighter due to just the hazards of the job. And then finally, the other component of your cost is your prior service cost rate. So prior service cost rate in your subdivisions situation, what that is going to do is it's going to reflect actuarial gains and losses, and it's also going to reflect the upgrade that you made in 2017. So when enhancements are made in the loggers plan, what happens is there's a retroactive effect to service. So prior to 2013, the general employees were under the 1.5% program, and now they're at the 1.75% program. In 2017, the city made that change. Okay, so when that change happened, all the service credit for the employees from that 2017 back to their hire date, or back to the join date, and if they did any purchase service prior to that joining date, then that would also be enhanced if it was City of Webster Grove's purchase. All of that service credit is then enhanced to the higher level. Okay, there's a cost for that. There's a actuarial, what's called an actuarial accrued liability that is created. That liability is amortized over a 20-year closed period and paid off over time through your prior service cost. So that's pretty well what's reflected in the two divisions where you have a little bit of a cost. And then fire is at zero. The other thing that this reflects is your funded level of each department. So each one of these departments are evaluated separately. They have their own schedule of contributions and their own funding schedule. We're going to go through each one of those individually here in just a second. But it also reflects that because if, for example, your fire is at zero, that generally, if you see zero, that means that you have enough assets currently in the trust to pay future benefits payable to all of the current active employees. Okay, that's generally what that means. So we're going to go through that in a little bit of detail here real quick. Let me scroll down here. Sorry, it's taking me just a sec. Being really slow. All right, there we go. So the following pages, these are also in your actuarial evaluation. The first page we just viewed is page 13. That's where your annual contribution rate notice is. It's where it shows you what your cost is going to effectively change to at the beginning of your next fiscal year, essentially. Okay. So the other side of that is from page 14, 15, and 16. These all illustrate the comparative schedule and what we're using for comparative schedule. The biggest thing we're talking about there is that I tend to look at is just funding progress because that's all listed down here. Because this is essentially the middle section here is essentially a reflection of your trust for each individual department. Okay, so what you're seeing here on the page, you have accrued liabilities versus accrued value of assets. So what accrued liabilities are, that you could replace the word liability and just say future benefits payable. And then actuarial value of assets is the actuarial value of assets. And that's showing you that you have 7.3 million and some change in your accrued liabilities and 7.3 million and some change in your accrued assets. Okay. So in the general division, you have 99.6 cents of every dollar that you owe in future benefits. That's a fantastic funding level. Any public pension plan, and particularly when we're measuring on an individual trust level like this, anytime a plan is 80% or more funded, that's considered to be a very financially strong and financially solvent trust. And that's because another way to look at it is if we just freeze the clock and stop in time and all 58 of your general employees were to be terminated because, say, the city no longer exists, so then the city's no longer going to hire anybody, we could pay 99.6 cents of every dollar that we owe on day one, but we don't owe every dollar that we owe on day one because their retirement age is age 60. And you probably have some folks that are not age 60 yet working at the city, and they wouldn't be eligible to draw that until the age of 60. Okay. So that's a schedule that's just kind of a brief how to interpret some of this data. There's a lot of data on this on here, but I tend to focus more just on the funded levels because that's a good reflection of how your funding's going. So when we look at the police division, this is again this is page 15 of your annual val. And remember when we talked about how your prior service cost was 0 for fire, it's like 0.5% or 0.6% for your general, but there was a little bit larger contribution for your police. This right here is why. Like I said, it's a reflection of your funded level. So, but again, this isn't necessarily bad news. So don't view it that way. This is actually really great news. While it's not exactly 100% funded, you're still in a really strong funded position in this individual trust. So again, interpreting it, your accrued liabilities, AKA future benefits payable, your actuarial value of assets. So you've got 11.4 million in accrued liabilities, 9.6 million in the value of assets. The funded percentage being 84%. That means you have 84 cents of every dollar that you owe in future benefits on hand today in the trust. But again, you don't owe every one of those dollars today. But the dollar amount that is the unfunded amount, meaning what you don't currently have funds on hand for is 1.8 million. Okay, that reflects in your balance sheet, which I'm sure Mr. Peterson will talk a little bit about at some point, but that reflects in the balance sheet and it shows up in the audit. So and it's a pension obligation. That's what it is. But we're not coming to you saying you need to pay us this fund, because there's a mechanism in place through our percentage of contribution. You are paying that liability down over time. Okay. So there's that piece. And now let's go to the fire, just so you guys can see that. And then I'll, of course, then leave it open for questions. And then Mr. Peterson has some things he also wants to discuss. So this is just the quick reflection of the fire department. So you are currently in accrued future benefits payable, 11.1 million. The value of the assets is 11.6 million. That means you have $1.04 of every dollar that you owe in future benefits right now. So you actually are posting an asset. It's not a liability, 447,000. That's why your prior service cost is zero for that fire department, because you're not what we would call necessarily overfunded, because it's not. I mean, you can see in 2017 you had $1.21. That's what we would call overfunded. So at that point, you were probably getting a discount to your contribution rate because of those funds you had there. But that's generally kind of the things that I look at when when Dr. Peoples and Mr. Peterson kind of called me up and had some questions. I kept on telling them, I was like, this is a really strong valuation. I mean, I've seen valuations that aren't in this good a shape. And this is a really, really strong position to be in as a city. Your funded levels are very strong. They're either at very close to being at 100%, but they're all above 80. And that's a really strong position to be in as a city. So at this point, if you have any further questions or anything, feel free to ask them.
Questions? All right. Mr. Peterson, we will let you proceed. Jeff, thank you very much. We do appreciate this. And, understanding how this impacts our employees is really important. So, we appreciate the additional information.
No problem. Happy to help. If you guys need anything else from me, feel free to reach out. I'm going to stick around for Mr. Peterson's part real quick. Then
Great. Thank you.
I asked Jeff to join us just to make sure in case there's anything that I don't know that he does. So I'm not going to make you go through all 16 slides. Some of these are recaps, and they'll get up on the screen here, but I did want to just you can go on the sheet in front of you while they're pulling them up on the screen. We did do on, I guess it'd be slide 4, as we talk about some of the rate issues. Just a trend to look back at the rates and where you're going and what we're seeing for the rates, meaning that the pension fund and the general fund are paying into. And you can just see that trend line there of where the rates are. Next budget, FY24, the budget we will discuss. We can pop ahead to slide 4 if we can. One more. Thank you. There, right there, one back one. You can see the rates for police and fire are both going to rise. And so I just wanted to point this out to note that we'll have to look at things we're going to talk about tonight, what the salaries are and what that rate will mean and what that will do to the total revenue that comes into the pension fund in a year, in the police and fire pension fund. So there's a lot of points that we're going to put a pin in and come back in the considerations that brings them all back together. Okay. Unfunded liabilities, we can go to the next slide. Shows you, so numbers in parentheses here are actually good numbers for us. This is what Jeff just talked about. These are fire is overfunded. We are just under 100% funded in general. Police still very strong. 84% funded is a really strong high pension funding mark for a fund. Very, very happy with that. But we do want to just point that out and talk about what can be done if you choose and want to do anything with those liability marks. And what that could potentially do for rates in the future. Okay. So I want to go to the next slide if we can. And this is a look. We took all 3 of the charts you just saw, put them in one chart for you so you can have it, the trend since 19 to the next year ahead on what our unfunded liability for the general employees, police and fire will be. You can see the changes in the variation since fiscal year 19. And then just to back up and go one more slide, we will just to point out This is state and local pensions nationwide, 2001 to 21. From public plans data, 75% is the average benchmark for funding across the plan. So again, just to give you a sense that we are exceeding the national benchmark that we're seeing in other places. There may be other data points out there that point out a little bit different number, but we are above and doing well in terms of what Webster's pension obligations are and the unfunded liabilities. So now I just want to quickly talk about our pension funding and what that means. And the next slide breaks it down the best way I could. We pay $1.4 million to loggers for the pension system. 203,000 of that comes from the general fund. 1.197 comes from the police and fire pension fund. And so the police and fire pension fund have existed. And in April of 2017, you heard about Mr. Papps talk about our election. We increased benefits for employees and added because of a new tax added into the stream. So we'll go to the next slide. This is the April 2017 Proposition P language that was passed 64 to 35 roughly. I added this emphasis, the underline, to point out, we call it the Police and Fire Pension Fund, but we also did, the voters authorize that revenue to pay to supplement the pensions of other employees, i.e. the general employees. So we have general employees, myself, not public safety, not fire, not police, public works folks that do reach into that fund to help supplement their pension, the obligation of the city. So we'll go into the next slide and just give you a quick sense of that revenue, that real estate tax that we have all, that the taxpayers graciously pay, brings in about $1.2 million. We have some couple, 131,000 of personal property tax. We have some utility real property, and then our investment income. So we expect this budget 1.355 million. And then we look at our expenditures, and then the next slide, this is going to show you where we do have a nice surplus going in our pension fund. We are just over $1 million in what we pay for police and fire pensions on those rates. In the fund, now this is just the pension fund, 139,000 is paid towards general employees' pensions, and that is 40.6% of general employees' pensions are funded by the police and fire pension fund. And when you get to one of the considerations, you'll see why I keep bringing that up. So just keep it in your mind. We also have group life insurance and long-term disability that are being paid by that fund. Those are really insurance products. We have done it. The auditors have never had an issue, but I would question whether or not it is a pension benefit type of fund. It certainly supplements income and such, and I don't want to detract from it, but it doesn't belong in the pension fund for that specific use of revenue. It was a question to be asked and answered through our conversations in the budget. So just briefly, the next one, this is our pension fund condition statement. We opened this budget year with 1.9 million in fund balance. We will expect to bank an extra $105,000 to close fiscal year 23. We expect with just over $2 million in the pension fund. Okay. Very quick, but all those things come together to bring you some considerations, not to answer tonight, but to think about as we look at the budget going forward. First of all, as Mr. Papps brought up, we do have the opportunity to look at benefit elections. The city has not done that since 2017. I'm not saying that administration is even recommending that we change anything, but do you want to schedule and start to do a every 2-year review of the benefit program that we offer through the pension? So we can, that's a consideration. Should we do that? Because we can change those every 2 years. That is a power that is yours as the city council. Also, on unfunded liability, we certainly have an area in the police where we are not near 100%, but still very strong and very good. Do we want any kind of policy in the pension policy about what is our target goals, considerations for unfunded liability? Places where if we get below, we puts triggers in, brings us back up, things like that. Are there other one-time contributions we want to make to changing those unfunded liabilities to change rates and such? That's consideration. And then where does that money come from? What kind of stream of funding puts that all together? The next slide, these are the really cosmetic things, but why I kept harping on the naming of things. The police and fire pension fund, there's a lot of money being paid for non-police and fire pensions out of the police and fire pension fund, which is completely legal and in line with what the revenue is. should we consider just calling it the pension fund so that, the public and those our employees are not, there's not a perceived ownership that is, something is wrong, right? It is absolutely accurate that all employees use that fund. We also, and I don't want to open up the budget books and go down this road and try to show you, but we don't categorize like employees like myself are part of the pension as general government employees in the pension fund. We report all the expenses as a public safety expense, which of course it's not, right? There's $139,000 not. So should we move those into a general government category? Very simple to do, but again, anytime we talk about pensions, there's invested incumbents looking at all those issues. And then, that issue about the insurance, should we be carrying those insurance products in the pension fund, or should they really be in the general fund? And how do we then look at moving other pension, swapping out potentially, moving some of that pension liability out of the general fund into the pension fund where it truly belongs? So a long list of considerations, not meant for you to answer tonight. I know pensions can be, if you're not in one, it can be a real snooze and sometimes, but I tell you, it's a very important and probably our most watched presentation so far this year. But this will be important coming up for this next year because of those rates and what the pension fund can carry as we look at the budget. And then what, if we want to make any one-time contributions to change those rates and maximize our use of those ongoing revenues. So considerations for the future. And again, thank you to Mr. Papst and the council for their time tonight.
Any questions here? All right, we will definitely consider these things and put this back on the schedule at some point later this spring. Mr. Papst, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate your time and the information you've provided to us. All right, I think we can move on now to appointments to boards and commissions. Julie Leaning, interviewed for Business Development Commission. Shall we appoint her?
Yes.
All right. And then Mike Clay and Kyle Wilson would both like to be considered for Plan Commission. Karen, as the liaison, do you have any, I'm going to let you say first if you have a preference, I guess.
No, I don't.
Okay. Does anyone have any strong feelings either way?
I think Kyle would be great on the Plan Commission. Not that Mike wouldn't, but I know that feel like this fits Kyle's experience and his interactions with the city thus far a little bit more appropriately.
I agree.
I agree.
I support that.
Excuse me?
I said I would support that.
Yeah, and I will say that, we haven't enacted it at this point, but we're going to offer some changes to the Plan Commission composition that encourages people with some direct experience, and it seems like he fits that as part of it. All right, so I'm going to write down on my paper here that we will. I just have a question. Is he replacing Scott Miller?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But we should encourage Mike to join a different board or commission.
He
Oh.
would be interested in something else because I think the library board, he was interested in that.
And
there
we
was
do have
position.
an opening on the
Yes,
library
because
board.
I told him that. So
Okay.
I can double check with him and.
That would be great. If you would check with him and let us
Sure.
know that I'd be grateful.
Yeah, it looked like he was interested in it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get him on one.
All right. And Kyle Wilson. Okay. So we have done that. I believe that's the end of our work session. Why don't we take 5 minutes, 3 minutes? How about 3 minutes? It's going to get late here. Break, and we will reconvene and get going on our regular agenda.
And it was one of those deals where, and I got grandchildren.
All right, we're recording again?
And so we took it. And it-
All right, welcome to the, I almost said January, no, it's only December 19th, 2022. Meeting of the Webster Grove City Council. We are happy to have you here. We welcome questions, ideas, comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience have to fill out a comment card. So please do, they're available on the table there. If you are on Zoom and like to make a comment, you'll please use the raise your hand function. And we will do this during the section of remarks from the community and visitors. We do have a public hearing. So if you want to make a comment at the public hearing, you'll be given the opportunity to do so as well. Those comments are limited to 3 minutes. And we will start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, we will move right along to the public hearing for Telva at the Ridge at 60 North Gore Avenue. And that's an application by Lauren Crowley for a conditional use permit to allow a coffee shop, no drive-through use in the existing structure located on a 0.45 acre lot at 60 North Gore Avenue in the D Commercial District. And I think I just did Neil's job for him, but Mara, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have before you a conditional use permit, pretty standard for ones that come before you at the council. This is coming to you from the Plan Commission, who reviewed this earlier this month. The application that you see, I need to go through a few brief things that need to be put on the record in regards to the CUP. It is a D commercial zoning. It's surrounded on all sides by some additional D commercial with some single family residential to the east. And it has industrial or planned commercial zoning, but with industrial uses to the west. Photos of the property here, most of you know it as Rolling Ridge, but it is a facility that has at different times over the years had some other smaller uses in the building, in upper floors and also in that same floor as the main part of the nursery. The history to the site. The structure was built in 1893 as a feed and grain store. It was originally zoned E industrial, and then over time was changed to the D commercial, along with another area also north of the railroad tracks adjacent to Old Webster. In 2021, you will probably remember you approved a CUP for the Willow in Webster for that use. And you will remember that at the last council meeting, you did start to review the change so that both Telva will be operating both the event space as well as the proposed coffee shop. We always have to remind you that the comprehensive plan addresses and that we're not changing the zoning. It's just an additional use being added to the existing D zoning. And that area was already defined as mixed use. I always have to remind you of what your factors are, that this will not substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion, substantially increase fire hazards, adversely affect the character of the neighborhood, adversely affect the general welfare of the community, or overtax public utilities. The proposal that's before you is to add a coffee shop, no drive-through use to the existing structure that is the Rolling Ridge Nursery. The space that they're planning to use overlaps with the space for the event space. So essentially what they're trying to do is use that space in the off hours when they aren't going to be using it for the public events or for the event space. They're using the same space that would have been their partial kitchen. They are not going to be cooking any food there. They will be brewing coffee and they will be bringing in pre-prepared food. They will have some small tables and chairs, smaller cafe style tables, and during the warmer months would have some of those same tables and chairs outside in the plant area. So the overlap of the two uses under the other CUP that's operating would also stay in place. We did a parking analysis. It was the same parking analysis as for the event space because the two uses can't be used at the same time. The event space was using the larger number. They needed a total of 65. Well, they have a total of 65 parking spaces, but the CUP for the event space use was requiring that they have and maintain all 65 of those spaces for their number of maximum people that could be in the space for the events. In this case, this is a much smaller use and they can't be operated at the same time. So the other will address our parking requirements. Couple things that we always look at are hours of operation and performance standards, lighting, things like that. Do note that my staff report was written obviously prior to the Plan Commission meeting. We did have a neighbor who both sent in a letter as well as spoke at the Plan Commission. So my recommendations are always based on our initial staff review without necessarily any input from neighbors. The Plan Commission did discuss briefly about the one comment in regards to the potential for noise and the hours of operation being 6 a.m. versus something like 7 a.m. 7 a.m. is our normal construction hours start time, but we do allow businesses, and many businesses don't have required hours. The request was for 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Obviously, it's a coffee shop, so they are looking for earlier time. But one of the conversations was about deliveries that would happen prior to the 6 a.m. time. The Planning Commission did not put anything specific in there, but I did go ahead and draft a little bit of language should that be a consideration that you did want to add. An optional condition would be access to the coffee shop use prior to 6 a.m. opening time will be from the Gore Street entrance. There was discussion at the Planning Commission about the Gore Street entrance being used versus the back parking lot, which is closest to residential. There's no other concerns regarding, we did put in place a couple of years ago additional performance standards for this area. We didn't used to have performance standards for all of our commercial districts, and we do have them in place now. So those would also hold true.
What time does Rolling Ridge open?
They actually open a little bit later, and I'll probably, if they are on, they can say specifically when they're open, but they do not have a specific required hours of operation because they don't need a CUP. So they can open and close when they want to, yes. And then if there was a complaint by neighbors after hours, it would go to the police for peace disturbance.
Thank you.
We always have to look at dimensional regulations if we have to put any additional setbacks. In this case, the structure does sit just a hair outside of their property. So we always put a reminder in the ordinance that it is a legal non-conforming structure, but that if any additions, which are not being proposed with the CUP, are made, that they would meet the setbacks in the zoning district. I have a very small list of recommendations, but are there any questions prior to that?
Let me ask, since this would go on the recommendation list, the deliveries from Gore at 6?
Yes, it would be added to this list.
How do we feel about adding that to this list?
I think we should add it to that list. I mean, because the people raised the concern, I think rather than have it become an issue, because they are going to be delivering things there, and you know, you can hear doors opening and closing, and I know how just when the trash trucks come through at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, that can be disturbing. I just think that if we have that on the side that's away from the residents, I think it's better consideration for the residents, and not to prevent a problem that could.
Would that just be for a certain early hours only? Or would you, Mara?
Did you say prior to 6, Mara?
Yeah.
The way I had drafted something was access to the coffee shop use prior to the 6 a.m. opening time will be from the Gore Street entrance.
Okay.
And do we know from the business, are they expecting large deliveries? Like, I think my only concern is, would restricting it to entering from Gore make it hard for them to receive any deliveries due to, like, you know, ramps or doors or anything like that?
So the understanding that we have, and the applicant would be able to state further if they're on Zoom at their point, is that it is simply being like the size of a panel truck that's bringing in the food for that day, because they're making the food in their other location and bringing it in. So it's not going to be, you know, it's not like the plant deliveries and other things like that. Rolling Ridge is currently proposing to make some changes to their delivery locations. They have another piece of land off of Pacific, and they're looking at the possibility of swapping where their plants and other deliveries are going, and then trying to reutilize the area that now where the deliveries are being made into be something more of just parking in general. So we've been talking with them a little bit about flip-flopping that, which would remove some of the uses away and deliveries and delivery trucks away from the residential street.
How would that impact their business by using only one entrance Gore?
The only question that came up at Plan Commission that was answered was that, so the one of the Rolling Ridge owners was on the Zoom and was able to state that that would be a pretty standard that they could use that other entrance. It's not an ADA accessible entrance. So from that standpoint, it's not ADA accessible, but for deliveries can be made in the other entrances on the other side on Gore.
But if it's not ADA, then there's not a ramp. Like I'm thinking of like a loaded dolly coming off of Gore. Is that? gonna
It's
be
not
possible?
ADA accessible for someone to take a wheelchair, but they do take deliveries on the Gore side for multiple things.
Okay.
All right, does anyone object to the addition of this recommendation? All right, so we don't need a formal vote on that, do we?
No.
Yes?
No.
No, good.
I mean,
Okay.
you'll ultimately vote on it in the end.
In there, all right, so Mara, please continue with your recommendation.
Sure. So all provisions of the city code shall apply except as expressly modified in the ordinance. So all of those other development regulations and other things in the code do apply. Hours of operation shall not exceed the following: 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. The applicant shall be responsible for pickup of all litter on their property and litter generated from their facility onto adjacent or rights of way. We do put that in as pretty standard in our commercial districts. The uses shall not encroach further beyond the south front property line than the existing legal non-conforming structure, and the D commercial district setbacks will adhere. And the conditional use permit is personal to the applicant and shall not run with the land.
All right, can we check the participants to see if the applicant is on and would like to make any sort of comment?
Just stop share. I don't know.
All right, if you are related to this and want to raise your hand, feel free to do that right now. All right, we're going to move right along, and I'll ask if there's anyone in the public here who would like to make a public comment. Please come on forward. And if you'll tell us your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Kevin Hasting, and I live at 73 Marshall Place, which is the home right across from the Rolling Ridge entrance for the proposed coffee shop, the Marshall Place entrance. I'm going to read my statement in order to stay under the 3-minute time limit. So our property, I previously submitted a letter dated December 5th to the Plan Commission, which I believe is part of your packet, concerning potential noise at the property line prior to 7 a.m. I believe you have a copy of that letter in your packet. Please note, I am not opposed to this use. However, I respectfully request you consider modifying the proposed ordinance 9209 to mitigate potential noise disruption prior to 7 a.m. And as Mara Perry answered or mentioned, she has modified language available to you if you need that. So the first is along the lines of what Mara said, and that is consider restricting employee access as well as employee parking to the Gore side prior to opening, whatever the opening time plans to be. If it's 7, if it's 6:30, if it's 6. But the idea is if they could park across the street on the Gore side and not in the 5 places between the entrance and my home, it would, minimize the opportunity for that noise disruption. Second, I would ask you to consider modifying the approved hours of operation. Certainly if the hours started at 7, we wouldn't have a concern about exceeding the 55 decibel level at the property line. It's hard to stay under 55 decibels with car door slamming and even conversations. So, if we get ahead of that a little bit, I think that would be wisdom. That said, an approved 6:30 a.m. would be better than 7, right? And or 7 would be better than the best. 6:30 would be better than 6. So I'd like you to at least consider that. I have an occupied upstairs bedroom that faces the Marshall Place entrance and is very close to 2 of the 5 parking spots right there. So I ask you to think about those things and consider modifying the the ordinance to include some of those things. So appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you mind calling for the first and second reading? No, not
He needs
yet.
to
He
enter
needs
the-
to enter the item.
Yes.
See, I was so close.
You were so close. So the public hearing being closed, I would move for the admission of the following exhibits under ordinance 9209. Number one, the Plan Commission Staff Report by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development for meeting date December 5, 2022. Number two, the applicant's written statement, survey of the property and proposed floor plans and sketches. Number three, a letter from Kevin Hastings, 73 Marshall Place, dated December 5, 2022. Number four, the draft minutes from the Plan Commission meeting dated December 5th, 2022. Number six, Mara Perry's PowerPoint before the City Council, December 20th, 2022. Number seven, the zoning code of the City of Webster Groves and any additional information that would have been received at this meeting. I'd move for the admission of all of those exhibits, please.
Thank you.
Now the hearing is
Now,
closed.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9209.
Second.
Bill 9209, first reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Telva LLC to allow a coffee shop, no drive-through use on an approximately 0.45 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 60 North Core Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
Is there any discussion?
I was just wondering, like, Mara, in the one that we added on, does that address employee parking too, or only deliveries?
I wrote it in a way to just address just in general, anything before the 6 a.m. time would be accessed. My understanding is that employees do park on the Gore side because they want to keep the other spaces available for customers closest to the building. But I did not put something specific in saying.
But it covers it.
It covers access to the building prior to 6 a.m.
And do you happen to know how the 6 a.m. start time lines up with other coffee shops?
Well, so the problem is most of our other coffee shops are either integrated with another restaurant. I was trying to remember, I apologize, I didn't look at like Clover and the Bees restaurant start times.
That's okay. I just didn't know if you knew it from.
I don't remember those. Sorry.
I tell you from experience.
But are those other ones as closely affiliated with a residential area? I mean, how are those others situated with the resident?
They're pretty far away. Bread companies, not near any residential. Clover and the Bee, you still have to get past the elementary school to get to the other ones.
Garden Cafe is,
Starbucks.
yeah.
Starbucks is the earliest.
Maybe Pop.
Yeah.
Starbucks is.
7 a.m.
Northwest is 7 at Schnucks. But yeah, the Starbucks is the only one right now, I think, that's at 6.
And sorry, I don't drink coffee.
We drink a lot. We drink it a lot.
What if we were to grant the 6 a.m. CUP, how hard would it be to change it to 7 a.m. in the event there was an issue?
So changing it to in that manner of not expanding, but making it less, I would believe that we would take it right back to council. It wouldn't have to go back through a hearing. Usually if it's expanding beyond what you allowed, we require it to go back to Plan Commission and then back to City Council. But it is in the ordinance, so it would have to come back to City Council for a change.
And the reason I asked, it's not like we're giving them a vested right in this 6 a.m. CUP that it would be somehow very difficult for us to do a 7 a.m. later on if there is an issue.
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, what I would say, this is just my own 2 cents. I'm okay with the 6 a.m. with the additional condition that we have, but I would say to this, Mr. Hastings and anyone else that is affected, come back to us if there's an issue. And we can change it, it seems like pretty effectively. And I think that you have a council with ears that are willing to listen and to abide, but notify us if there's a problem.
Other comments?
I think it fills a need, the early morning. So I see the reason for it. But yeah, I also understand the concern.
David, in terms of a change, it becomes a due process question. And I don't think that I don't think you could just change it.
That's what I was worried
I
about.
think there is a bit of a vesting. And so again, there would have to be a determination that somehow it was a demonstrable nuisance that would be problematic. So again, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that it's not quite as easy as just come and we'll change it.
So what if we were to do this, Mara? What if we could the hours of operations be from that starting at 7 AM, but we give them the ability to access starting at 6 AM? I guess they automatically have as much access as they want, right? So I
Yeah,
guess
as
that
long
would-
as the business isn't operating, those are really just hours of operation. And I know and I apologize, I mean, I did send the applicant the Zoom again a couple hours ago, just to be safe. I know when they were talking with me, they weren't, they haven't operated a coffee shop before. So they were trying to feel out when would be the right time to open. And so that is why they asked for the timing that they did. So I don't think that they necessarily know yet whether 6 AM is going to be that optimum time or 7. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, 'cause
So
that-
what if we did the opposite? Sorry, Carrie, I didn't catch you out. What if we did the opposite, Neil, where we grant a 7 AM CUP, but we want to expand it later to 6 AM? Could we do that a lot easier?
That actually is easier, as strange as that may sound. And the reason it's easier is because once you have indicated this is the time, if the owner says, well, I acted in reliance upon what you've said, and I don't know how necessarily that would apply to opening times, but again, that would be the argument. You've told me I have this and now you're taking it away. It's easier to grant more than take some away.
So that would be my recommendation at this point, until we hear from the applicant, hopefully in 2 weeks when they come. I would recommend that we change it to 7 AM with the prospect to potentially change it to 6 AM based off of their performance starting at 7 AM.
And
I'd almost rather listen to the applicant before we make any changes.
Oh, I agree, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's where I'm headed right now.
Yeah, because
We'd have to do a public hearing again, correct, if we expanded the hours?
You could, go ahead.
My understanding, you would have to open the hearing back up.
Yes, you'd open it back up for the purposes of that limited purpose.
yeah, I'm very sensitive to the Mr. Hastings issue, but we're talking about running a business, a coffee shop. And coffee shops are normally open early to take care of the individual going wherever they are. So open it. I don't know what impact it would be for the business to open up at 7 versus 6. So I'd rather hear from the applicant before we make any type of
Well,
adjustment.
why don't we propose this? If I could ask you to get in touch with the applicant, if they can be with us at our next meeting, we certainly would love to have them. If they cannot, we'd at least like a written response about the changes in opening time. And then if no one objects, we'll do the second reading and we can revisit this question once we've heard from the applicant.
I guess my only concern is it's a bit of a catch-22 because if they are busy from 6 to 7, they justify the extra hour, but they also potentially create noise. And if they're not busy from 6 to 7, then it's kind of a moot point on both sides, right?
Noise nuisance come up under some different type of,
No, it's the standards. It's the noise standards. right?
Performance
There must be a
standards.
reason why they want to try 6 AM.
Oh, I'm,
so
I see it.
I would, yeah,
would
honor
need to
that
hear
they've
what that
got a
is.
reason.
Right.
Right, but I mean, I think it's not,
There might be a reason.
they've given it consideration that this might be a good idea. So I think I would like to hear from them. I don't feel,
But as
I
the,
did-
not to interrupt you, I beg your pardon.
but as Emerson said, I am sensitive to the business owners.
Right, and I want to be
So-
clear, by asking for this information, I don't think any of us are committing to a time at this moment. We're just gathering more information before we make that decision.
Right.
correct. I mean.
I agree. I'm not making any commitments, but all I'm saying is that while I'm sensitive to the business owner, I feel like our number one job is to be sensitive to the homeowner first. I mean, this is a residential community. I mean, I get the concept. You bought a house, you're a business and everything. I get that, but I think that in my mind, like, just seems like too often we place the burden on our homeowners rather than on the businesses. The businesses have the ability to change, and also they might have the most justified reason in the world, but we get to make the determination.
We might understand too, that there's not going to be any industrial trucks or industrial deliveries to the business. That could create a lot of noise factor. It's going to be more of a delivery of sandwiches and.
One other thing to
Oh.
note, which I always try to I talk to residents about when it comes to noise and things like that, is that technically the long list of uses that could automatically go into that building without a CUP that would not have hours of operation are pretty extensive. And right now, the D district is one of the only ones that has CUPs for it is the only one that has CUPs for restaurants and coffee shop uses, because it's supposed to be much more of a tight walkable, doesn't have a lot of parking. But our C district, if you wanted to put a coffee shop in there, nothing would be needed and you wouldn't get any specific hours of operation. Like our Starbucks doesn't have a drive-through. It doesn't need a CUP. It's not immediately adjacent to residential, but it's close. So just keeping that other element or piece in mind, that I try to be sensitive when it comes to, it's an extra step for restaurants to go into Old Webster.
So David, I'm going to stop you because I don't think we need to have the rest
I
of
agree.
this discussion.
I
But-
was just gonna
okay,
ask a quick
go ahead.
question.
Please
Let's look
do.
at it from the reverse, right? Let's look at it from nighttime perspective. What businesses are open later at night that are close to a residential community or a residential house? And how do we deal with it that way?
It's the same thing. It's our restaurants.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I'm trying to think of a good example. Weber's isn't a good one. And maybe, Parkmore, Llewellyn's
Because it backs up to resident.
residential. So
Yeah.
how do we control the sound there? I mean, do they have to stop playing music at a certain hour outside or?
They have similar hours of operation. All of the restaurants in Old Webster have pretty much matching hours of operation.
So we don't make any tailoring for them.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, why don't we go ahead and have that second reading?
Bill 9209.
No, you're good.
Second reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Telva LLC to allow a coffee shop, no drive-through use on an approximately 0.45 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 60 North Gore Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
Thank you. So we will revisit this at our next meeting for discussion before that third reading. We are now here for the remarks from the community and visitors. Do we have any other remarks? I think we've used up all the time that Mr. Buck might have otherwise used. All right. So is there any new business from me, the council members, city attorney, city manager? Anyone have new business? I don't think I do. Nope. No. All right, let's go with our unfinished business. Councilwoman Alexander, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9205, please?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the final reading of bill number 9205 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9205, third reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Telva LLC to allow banquet facility and dancing academy uses on an approximately 0.45 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 60 North Gore Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto, and repealing ordinance 9150.
Is there any discussion? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Councilmember Franklin, could we have the reading, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9206, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9206 and then subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9206, third reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Sun Mojo LLC to allow a restaurant, no drive-through use on an approximately 0.42 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 101 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto, and repealing ordinance 7761.
Is there any discussion? All right, time to vote.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, on to Councilmember Bliss, the third reading of Bill number 9207, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9207 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9207, third reading, an ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending chapter 42, licensing and regulation of liquor, article 1, intoxicating liquor, by amending section 42.028, bond required, and section 42.050, regulation of retail package sales, conditions of license, and matters related thereto.
Questions or comments? All right, time for the vote, please.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith, could you call for the third reading of Bill number 9208, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9208 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9208, an ordinance amending the traffic code, chapter 60, by amending Schedule H to change the parking regulations for the Old Webster Business District.
Are there any comments or questions? All right, time to vote again. We're doing lots of voting tonight.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
And we are on to new business. Councilwoman Richardson, could you call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9210, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9210.
Second.
Bill 9210, first reading, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the city of Webster Groves a temporary construction easement to the Missouri American Water Company to relocate the water main along North Elm Avenue at Kirkham Avenue for the culvert replacement project.
Are there any questions, comments? Hooray. Second reading, please.
Bill 9210, second reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the city of Webster Groves a temporary construction easement to the Missouri American Water Company to relocate the water main along North Elm Avenue at Kirkham Avenue for the culvert replacement project.
All right, Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd, could you call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9211?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9211.
Second.
Bill 9211, first reading. An ordinance imposing a sales tax at a rate of 3% on all tangible personal property retail sales of adult use marijuana sold within the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, pursuant to Article 14, Section 2.6, subsection 5 of the Missouri Constitution, subject to the approval by the voters of the city at the general municipal election to be held on April the 4th, 2023, designating the form of ballot and directing the city clerk to provide notice of said election.
I assume this means that we need to go to the ballot.
Well, we're doing both, and there
Okay.
is a dispute as to whether it applies, but you don't miss if you put it on the ballot. So.
All right, questions or comments?
Nope, that was my question, because I thought we didn't have to put it on the
Yeah.
ballot, and I did hear on the news, I think it was the city, and they were
Yeah.
saying that they had to do it and put it on the ballot, and so.
Yeah.
That's not what the amendment says, but there are people who believe that the conventional wisdom is that that's what one must do. So, so we're doing that.
Okay,
There we
thank
go.
you.
Second reading, please, then.
Bill
please.
9211, second reading. An ordinance imposing a sales tax at a rate of 3% on all tangible personal property retail sales of adult use marijuana sold within the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, pursuant to Article 14, Section 2.6, subsection 5 of the Missouri Constitution, subject to the approval by the voters of the city at a general municipal election to be held on April the 4th, 2023, designating the form of ballot and directing the city clerk to provide notice of said election.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Alexander, could you call for the first and second reading of Bill 9212?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor.
And third.
Pardon, Councilwoman Alexander.
Yeah.
This relates to the contracts that council is going to be approving later. So I would ask if there's any questions regarding the contracts before you approve the salary ordinance.
Okay, then. Let's see.
That's on the consent agenda.
Correct.
All
So
right,
you wouldn't
can
wanna-
we then go ahead and have that first reading and then we'll have our discussion?
Was there a second on that?
Did you call?
Second.
I don't think.
I don't do anything.
Oh,
else.
never mind. I take it back. I take it back.
Second reading, please, Councilmember Alexander.
Councilperson Alexander, I'll just wait here then.
Okay. Yes, I would like to call for the first
And second.
and second reading of Bill number 9212.
Second.
Bill 9212 having been appropriately seconded. This is the first reading in ordinance defining the pay grades of the classified and unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications and repealing ordinance 9187.
All right, so we have discussion both on this particular bill as well as what's in the consent agenda. Anyone have comments or questions that they'd like to make? I'm going to start here by just saying how grateful I am to everyone involved, to Dr. Peoples, to Mr. Peterson, to our council, Mr. Woodard as well, and also to the police officers who served the bargaining unit because this is really a good thing for our community, the stability and the partnership that's been formed here. And so I'm really grateful to everyone and look forward to operate under this agreement.
Same.
All right.
The big accomplishment.
Okay, so
I do not have any questions.
I don't have any questions.
okay, so I think we can go to that second reading. Thank you, though. I appreciate the opportunity. I don't know, Dr. Peoples, if you want to make a comment before we move on.
I'm just gonna say that for the record, I can never pinpoint when you might have questions.
The information was thorough. I understood it and,
That's why we keep you on your toes.
You do, you absolutely keep, and Miss Perry as well, because I don't think she was anticipating in the last hearing as well. So thank you all. I echo what the mayor said. It is a huge achievement and I'm incredibly grateful to police officers, sergeants, lieutenants who will hopefully be entering into the bargaining agreements. At times, the negotiations were difficult, as is the nature of bargaining. But both parties came together as evidenced, and I'm just incredibly grateful for the services that they provide and will continue to provide. So thank you.
All right, I think we're safe to go to the second reading now.
Bill 9212, second reading. An ordinance defining the pay grades of the classified and unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications and repealing ordinance 9187.
All right, thank you. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent? agenda?
Reading.
Oh, I skipped it. I
Special
didn't remember to ask you.
Yeah.
All right, I believe we have a compelling reading to go, a compelling reason to go ahead and do the third reading.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for a third reading of bill number 9212 for the justification of that we need to pay our employees, not only pay them, but also pay them the appropriate amount.
And so just adding to the record, the timeliness of this, because they want to enact the contracts, make it the compelling reason.
Yes.
So there needs to be a second on that.
Second.
Bill 9212, third and final.
Hold on,
reading.
do we have to vote on the compelling reason?
Actually, you do. I beg your
Yes.
pardon. Yes.
All right, thank you.
I got so excited with all this.
Now,
So many seconds.
Ready?
that's just me tonight.
Councilmember Richardson,
Oh, yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes,
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
all right, now the third reading.
Bill 9212, third and final reading, an ordinance defining the pay grades of the classified and unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications and repealing ordinance 9187.
Do we need a
I
second?
believe, yeah, we do.
Do
We
we-
ready for the vote?
No,
You just vote now.
just vote.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Frank.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Now, would anyone like to remove anything from the consent agenda? All right, Councilmember Bliss, would you call for its approval?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
We've made two appointments to boards and commissions, Kyle Wilson to the Plan Commission and Julia Leaning to the Business Development Commission. We do need an executive closed session. I believe we are 1 and 3 and 4.
1, 3, and 4.
Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session related to attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 1, close parens. Personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 3, close parens. And negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 1, 2, close parens.
Second.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, thank you all.